Good afternoon. I'm Cláudia Candotti. I'm a professor of the postgraduate program Ciências do Movimento Humano da Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul, which I'm now representing in this public defense session for the doctoral defense of candidate Isis Navarro. The title of the thesis is Proposition of an Assessment Protocol for Idiopathic Scoliosis Using Photogrammetry to Teleconsultation, Development, Validation, and Reproducibility of DIPA-S e-Health. The examining board is composed of Dr. Eric Parent from University of Alberta, Canada, Dr. Robert Meeves from Faculdade de Ciências Médicas da Santa Casa de São Paulo, and Dr. Jefferson Loss from Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul. This session will last a maximum of 3 hours, starting with Isis presenting her work, respecting maximum time of 30 minutes. Next, each member of the panel will ask questions to Isis in the following order. First, Dr. Eric Parent, then Dr. Robert Meeves, and then Dr. Jefferson Loss. Each professor will have up to 20 minutes to question the candidate. Isis will have an equal amount of time to respond to each professor. At the end of the arguments, I, the supervisor of this thesis, will have a few minutes to speak about Isis. After that, the professors will withdraw to deliberate the grade. Isis, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Just want to check if you can see my screen. Okay. Good afternoon. I would like to thank to the Professor Jefferson Loss, Eric Parent, and Robert Meeves that kindly accepted to participate in this important step of doctoral procedure that is the evaluation of my thesis defense. It is my great pleasure to present the thesis title, Proposition of an Assessment Protocol for Idiopathic Scoliosis Using Photogrammetry Through Teleconsultation, Development, Validation, and Reproducibility of DIPA-S e-Health, under the supervision of the Professor Cláudia Candotti. This is our outline for the next 30 minutes. I'm going to do a general introduction followed by 4 chapters, 1 systematic review, 1 technical report, and 2 original articles. At the end, I'm going to present my conclusions, limitations, and perspectives. The pandemic caused by the novel coronavirus experienced over the past 3 years has changed the way conventional periodic health consultations are conducted, contributing to the rapid and dynamic shift to digital platforms. Throughout the years 2020 and 2021, there was a growing number of patients with spinal deformities in need of teleconsultation-based care. And even after the return of in-person consultations, a percentage of the appointments remain as teleconsultation. This new form of service provision has gained ground over the past 3 years, and this new era is starting to solidify within the scientific literature. It is evident that there is a gap in the evidence regarding the reliability and validity of quantitative clinical assessment procedures for patients with scoliosis through teleconsultation. In this context, the objectives of this thesis are to develop and evaluate the validity, diagnostic accuracy, and reproducibility of an assessment protocol for idiopathic scoliosis using photogrammetry through teleconsultation. The chapter 1 is a systematic review with the primary objective of to identify the clinical postural variables evaluated in scoliosis patients through telemedicine, and the secondary objectives were to determine how the clinical postural variables were measured and the degree of reliability. The protocol was registered on Prospero. 2 reviewers conducted the screening of titles and abstracts, full text screening, and data extraction in a blinded and independent manner. Systematic searches of the literature were conducted in June of 2020 on 4 databases. The match term scoliosis and telemedicine with their corresponding respective free text terms were used with the Boolean operators OR and AND. And here you can see a full search strategy used on PubMed. The eligibility criteria were idiopathic scoliosis, postural evaluation through telemedicine, and clinical postural variables evaluated with their statistical coefficients for reliability, and no restrictions on the study design were applied. In results, initially 136 studies were identified in the systematic searches, leaving 6 studies included for analysis and data extraction. The publication year ranged from 2012 to 2023, with a total sample of 1,002 subjects. The clinical postural variables evaluated were angle of trunk rotation, angle between body segments, movement, impedance, synchronous observation, and aesthetic deformity. In the results, the assessment was performed asynchronously in one study, synchronously in 4 studies, and with both possibilities in one study. The devices used were smartphones in 3 studies, smartphones, tablets, or computer in 2 studies, and an instrumented t-shirt with sensor in 1 study. For the analysis, smartphone application, commercial impedance analyzer was seen to perform the analysis. Only 2 studies reported measurements properties in terms of concurrent validity and reproducibility. For validity, we saw ICC for the ATR and correlation for STS test, and for reproducibility, also ICC with addition of the minimal detectable change and standard error of measurement for the ATR, and Cronbach's alpha for the STS test. The methodological quality assessment was performed using the Critical Appraisal Skills Program, composed by 12 items, and for this study, the sum of the final score was converting to a percentage. We can see here that the minimal percentage achieved the methodological quality was 60, and the highest was 100, with an average score of 78%. It is essential to emphasize the great gap in terms of validity, reproducibility, and diagnostic accuracy of the available forms of evaluation of patients with scoliosis. The difficulty seems to start with the very limited availability of objective remote measurements for clinical parameters known to be relevant for the evaluation and follow-up of these patients. One limitation of this study was the restricted search terms applied, which may have contributed to the scarce number of studies found. In conclusion, this review provided an overview of the postural clinical variables that can be evaluated in patients with scoliosis through telemedicine. Synchronous and asynchronous capture methods were used, and it was not possible to meta-analyze the reliability coefficients. In the chapter 2, which is a technical report, the objective was to present the development and assessment of measurement accuracy of variables obtained with the JIPA-S eHealth Capture app and analysis software as part of a telehealth assessment protocol for patients with idiopathic scoliosis. To enable the correct posture of photographic images for subsequent analysis, the development of an application called JIPA Capture was performed. The application was intended to minimize artifacts stemming from the traditional method of acquiring photographic images, facilitating the collection process, as our idea is that image acquisition will be performed by users in a home environment without the presence of a healthcare professional. For this purpose, the internal accelerometer was used to determine the orientation of smartphone access, and a photo is automatically obtained only when the smartphone is aligned. Here you can see at the screen that during the holding of the phone, when the bottle was in red, it was not possible to capture an image. While the user hold the phone in the aligned position during 2 seconds, the bottom of the screen turned to green and automatically is capture the image, as you can see on the right of your screen. For measurement accuracy, consecutive images of a real plumb line taken for a physiotherapist student by using the JIPA Capture app was used. The app automatically drew a virtual plumb line to ensure the absence of inclination. And in black, you can see the real plumb line, and in red, the virtual plumb line. For the measurement accuracy, the JIPA SE Health Analysis software was used. The system allowed measurement on sagittal, frontal, and axial planes. To measure the inclination of the plumb line, the JIPA SE Health Analysis software for measurement in axial plane was used. For this, the rater clicked on the two extremities of the real plumb line, and then the software automatically calculated the angle formed between the straight line that passes through the 2-point clicked and the horizontal reference line. The same procedure was performed for the virtual plumb line. For statistical purpose, the Wilcoxon test, median, minimum, maximum, range, mean difference, and RMS error were calculated, adopting a p-value less than 0.05. 50 images using the app comprised the sample. The median value of the real plumb line was 89.8 and for virtual 90, with a range of 1.4 degrees for real and 0.6 for virtual. The mean difference was very small, 0.1 degree, with a significant p-value. The RMS error was 0.2 degrees. The variability of the data was very small, which resulted in a very small standard error of the mean. This caused any difference between mean and zero to generate a significant t-value. The small amplitude and low RMS error confirmed the accuracy of image capture using the JIPA Capture app and the analysis by the analysis software. A relevant feature of the system is that it will allow image capture by the parents at the home environment and the measurement performed separately directly by the professionals, reducing sources of errors and increasing its applicability in the follow-up of this patient. In conclusion, the JIPA SE eHealth Capture app and analysis software for image acquisition and measurement was developed and is ready for testing with patients. In the chapter 3, which is an original article, the objective was to evaluate the concurrent validity and diagnostic accuracy of the system in relation to in-person clinical assessment. It is important to highlight that for the chapter 3 and 4, they were both observational cross-sectional prospective studies developed using the same eligibility and exclusion criteria. The eligibility criteria were patients of both sexes, aged between 7 and 25 years, with ability to maintain standing position without help, and with a leg length discrepancy less than 2 centimeters. The exclusion criteria were surgical intervention of the spine, lower limbs amputation, or any diagnosable cause of scoliosis. Both studies were approved by the Research Ethics Committee of the university, and all the participants signed the informed consent. The chapter 3 followed the STAR checklist, and the sample size calculation resulted in a sample of 45 subjects. The chapter 4 followed the GRASS checklist with a minimal sample of 22 subjects. For this study, in the clinical assessment performed in person, were measured the presential frontal trunk imbalance, defined as the distance from the prominent vertebra to the laser plumb line passing through the intergluteal cleft. The presential sagittal trunk imbalance, defined as the difference between the distance from the prominent vertebra to the plumb line and the distance from S1 to the plumb line. And the presential angle of trunk rotation, defined as the angle formed by the posterior prominence of the ribs or the transverse processes in the lumbar region and the horizontal during the forward bending of the trunk, and it was measured using the scoliometer. To acquire the images, parents and professionals received a video tutorial describing the preparation of the environment and the capture process. All patients were photographed in minimal clothing with the intergluteal cleft visible and hair tied back. And now I'm going to show you a short part of the video sent for the evaluators. I thought you didn't get my audio, but it was in Portuguese, so it was just explaining how they have to prepare the environment. The patients were photographed by their own family members or by professionals, physiotherapists, or surgeons using the JIPA-S eHealth Capture app. 3 images were obtained in each position. For capturing the image in the frontal plane from the back and sagittal plane on the right profile, they were positioned on a top of sheet of paper with the heels or the lateral malleolus aligned with the outer edge of the sheet for image capturing on frontal and sagittal planes respectively. For capturing the image of the back in the forward bending of the trunk, it was not necessary to position the patient on the top of the sheet. Here you can see an example of image capture and the image obtained from this procedure. And another example of image capture at home performed by the parents. The analysis was performed using the JIPA-S eHealth analysis software, which allows importing the image from a local folder or the server. Using the JIPA-S eHealth, it was possible to obtain 3 clinical parameters: the sagittal trunk imbalance, the frontal trunk imbalance, and the angle of trunk rotation. In the right profile, the sagittal trunk imbalance was measured in millimeters. The evaluator made the 2 clicks on the fixed sheet on the ground, 1 at each end, necessary for image calibration, and 1 click on the point representing S2 in the image. 1 click on the point representing the spinal process of the vertebra C7 RT1, and from there, the sagittal trunk imbalance variable is calculated. To measure the frontal trunk imbalance, the evaluator also made 2 clicks on the paper fixed to the ground, 1 at each end, necessary for image calibration, 1 click in the intergluteal cleft, and 2 clicks on the neck, 1 at each side, at the C71 level, delineating the lateral margins of the neck. And from there, the frontal trunk imbalance variable is calculated. In the axial plan, the evaluator made 2 clicks, 1 at each apex, highest and lowest point of each hemibody, right and left, close to the spine. And from there, the angle of trunk rotation variable is calculated. For statistical purpose, we used correlation test, simple linear regression, RMS error calculation, and blend-Altman graphical analysis. For diagnostic accuracy, we use ROC curve analysis, sensitivity, specificity, and the area under the curve. In the results, 70 patients were evaluated, of which 2 were excluded due to having diagnosable cause of scoliosis. A total sample consisted of 68 patients with the losses attributed to image quality or failure in the server submission system, with 69% being girls. The mean age was 13.9 years with a Cobb angle of 29.1, with 56% of the curves in the thoracic region and 31% of the patients were undergoing a brace treatment. For the correlation, the frontal trunk imbalance, the correlation was high with an R square of 40% and with an RMS error of 10 millimeters. For the angle of trunk rotation, the correlation was very high with 83% of R square and 4 degrees of RMS error. And for the sagittal plane, the correlation was lower, was moderate, with 32% of R square and 20 millimeters of error. In the blend-Altman graphical analysis for frontal trunk imbalance, we had 6 subjects outside the limits of agreement. Also, it was possible to see a trend line indicating that the higher the measured value, the greater the associated error, and the lower the agreement between in-person and remote assessment. For sagittal, it was also possible to see a trend line with 3 subjects outside the limits of agreement. For ATR, we had 4 subjects outside the limits of agreement, and no trend line was observed. For diagnostic accuracy analysis, the scoliometer was used as reference, adopting a cutoff of 7 degrees. Values of low discriminative capacity were found for the variables in frontal and sagittal planes with a non-significant area under the curve. High discriminative capacity for the variable ATR with a cutoff of 4 degrees, showing a significant area under the curve with sensitivity and specificity highs were found. Photogrammetry is a reliable method for evaluating various relevant variables in monitoring patients with scoliosis. Although highly useful, its application depends on a specific protocol, which currently requires in-person execution. The JIPA-S eHealth analysis, capture and analysis system introduces a new way of employing photogrammetry for the evaluation of patients with scoliosis through telemedicine, eliminating the need for in-person presence. The three-dimensionality of scoliosis necessitates assessment tools capable of measuring change in all 3 planes. Similar to radiography, where variables are obtained from different views of the patient, clinical evaluation using photogrammetry also requires image from different planes. The frontal trunk imbalance show a high correlation with the in-person clinical assessment and a low RMS error. Similarly, in the study by Fortin, the authors evaluated 50 patients in person using photogrammetry and compare it with radiography. And the study also demonstrated correlation of 0.76 between photogrammetry and trunk imbalance measured in X-ray examinations. On the other hand, in the study by Zhang, the authors found a low correlation between the C7 deviation and Although frontal trunk imbalance is a common alteration among scoliosis patients, no studies were found using this variable for scoliosis diagnosis through rock curve analysis. The assessment of changes in the sagittal plane is an important aspect for patients with scoliosis, and typically the thoracic kyphosis and lumbar lordosis are measured on X-ray, as well as spinopelvic parameters. These measurements are complemented by the linear measurement called sagittal vertical axis. The SVA informs about the position of the trunk in the sagittal plane, providing information about anterior or posterior displacement of the trunk, and it's exactly the same parameter obtained clinically through the sagittal balance. We found a moderate correlation between in-person clinical assessment and teleconsultation with a low RMS error. 19.3 millimeters is indicated as the reference for sagittal balance, characterizing a balanced trunk. In our study, the mean sagittal trunk imbalance obtained through in-person assessment was 30.1, while the mean of the teleconsultation was 43.9. Indicating an anterior trunk imbalance in the studied sample. The variable STI show low discriminative capacity using the scoliometer as the clinical reference, and no studies were found analyzing the diagnostic accuracy of trunk position given by SVA or sagittal balance. The JIPA system was developed to quantify postural variables in all 3 planes, considering the three-dimensionality of scoliosis. Among the 3 variables obtained with the system, the angle of trunk rotation showed the best performance in terms of validity, being the only variable with high discriminative capacity. Other authors have showed high agreement, correlation, and discriminative capacity in measuring the ATR with alternative tools with the scoliometer as a reference. we emphasize a positive aspect of the use of the system, where the ATR measurement is performed by the professional entirely remotely. In a retrospective study with 59 patients with scoliosis, the use of scoliometer reduces the exposure to ionizing radiation and also reducing costs with radiograph, emphasizing the benefits of clinical monitoring through ATR measurements. However, these significant findings are based on assessment conducted by professionals only in person. There was a significant decrease in number of initial specialized consultations for spinal deformities during the COVID-19 pandemic. Consultations had a significant reduction in 2020, being less than 75% between April and June when compared to 2019. In 2020, 22% of the appointments were conducted online. Furthermore, idiopathic scoliosis was the primary diagnosis in 50% of patients observed for the first time, and there was an 18% increase in the number of patients requiring bracing. In conclusion, the JIPA SE Health Capture and Analysis System is valid for measuring postural variable in frontal and axial planes with high discriminative capacity only for the axial plane. My last chapter is the chapter 4, with the objective to assess the repeatability, intra and inter-rater reproducibility of the system through teleconsultation. For this purpose, 3 independent and blinded evaluators analyzed the images obtained during data collection. The evaluators included 2 physiotherapists and 1 physiotherapy student with professional clinical practice experience ranging from 4 to 14 years. All evaluators received standardized prior training lasting 1 hour. For repeatability analysis, each image was analyzed twice consecutively by each of the 3 evaluators. For intra-rater reproducibility, only the evaluator 1 reanalyzed the first image obtained in each position with a 5-day interval. And for the inter-rater measurements, all 3 evaluators analyzed the first image from each position. For statistical analysis, the ICC Trichon-Mackay was used and classified as poor, moderate, and excellent. It was also calculated the standard error of measurement, the minimal detectable change, adopting a p-value less than 0.05. The sample consisted of 262 images from 30 patients of both genders, with 70% being girls. The average age was 14.7 years, with an average Cobb angle of 30.7 degrees, and 18 curves were in the thoracic region. For the analysis, the sample varied from 26 to 30 patients, with the losses attributed to image quality or failure in the server submissions system. The ICC was excellent for all the evaluators, with low values of SAM and MDC. For the intra-rater analysis, the ICC was also excellent for all variables, with low values of SAM and MDC. In the inter-rater analysis, we found an excellent ICC for frontal and axial planes, with low values of SAM and MDC, but unfortunately, a weak ICC value in the sagittal plane, with the highest values of SAM and MDC. The clinical assessment of patients with scoliosis is a recommended priority among experts in the field. The frontal plane, the measurement of the trunk imbalance is a parameter with high priority of recommendation, and this parameter is relevant in both scenarios, conservative and also for the surgical treatment. Trunk imbalance in the frontal plane has a high prevalence among patients with scoliosis, ranging from 67 to 85. In the study conducted by Zhang in 2023 with 110 subjects, the author measured the trunk imbalance in the frontal plane using photogrammetry and reported an excellent inter-rater reproducibility with an MDC of 7.2 millimeters. Our study also demonstrated excellent ICC values for both repeatability, intra and inter-rater reproducibility. Notably, in our study, the inter-rater MDC was 0.7 millimeters, which is 10 times smaller than the value reported by Zhang for in-person photogrammetry assessment. The measurement of the angle of trunk rotation using a scoliometer is widely used for screening and monitoring scoliosis patients. In the study by Bezager, the authors found an excellent reproducibility of measurement of the angle of trunk rotation performed with a smartphone by parents in a home setting. And this approach represents a form of a remote assessment, eliminating the need for an in-person meeting between patient and healthcare professional. In the study by Negrini in 2019, the authors reported the reference value for the sagittal balance, where higher values indicated an anterior displacement and lower values indicated a posterior displacement of the trunk. In our study, the mean STI was 44.8 millimeters, and although repeatability and intra-rater reproducibility were excellent, the inter-rater reproducibility show a weak ICC, and additionally, when examining the minimal detectable change values for the variables analyzed, the MDC of the sagittal balance was the highest and proportionally the largest. When describing the measurement in this study by Negrini, the authors performed palpation and marcation of the anatomical structures when the distance should be measured. And you believe that a significant source of variability in the measurement could be the difficulty of visualizing C7 and S2 in the profile view and the absence of reference markers. In conclusion, the JIPA SE Health capture and analysis system demonstrates reproducibility for use in the clinical evaluation of scoliosis through teleconsultation. My general conclusions are: in the chapter 1, it was possible to determine a few postural variables evaluated through telemedicine, but there is an important gap in the literature regarding quantitative tools with tested reliability and diagnostic accuracy. In chapter 2, it was possible to develop an accurate system for image capture and analysis called JIPA SE Health, which is ready for test on the target population. The chapter 3 showed that the system is valid for the measurement in frontal and axial planes with high discriminative capacity only in the axial plane. And in the chapter 4, it was possible to see that the system was reliable for the measurement of all variables by the same rater and from frontal and axial planes by different raters. As limitations, the Capture app is only available for smartphones with the Android operating system. Some feedbacks indicated difficulty faced by the users, parents, or caregivers while using the app in a home environment. And in this study, it was not possible to validate, confirm the diagnostic accuracy, or establish inter-rater reproducibility for the variable in the sagittal plane. As perspectives, initially, it is understood that it is important to disseminate the advancement achieved through this extensive research by publishing scientific articles, participating in conferences, national and international, and providing lectures. And also, the system will be available for users downloading for free on Biomed's website. Thank you all for your attention.
Well, I invite Professor Eric to question Isis.
All right, so I'll begin with congratulations on a very clear presentation, and I appreciate how clear your English presentation was, so thank you. I appreciate that. So that's a lot of work, and so I have a few questions. I think I'll start focusing on chapter 4. Depending on how much time I have, I'll then jump around elsewhere. So chapter 3, in fact, is where I'll start. Can you summarize for me where you were recruiting the participants from? What was the reason they were referred to you for the study?
Okay, so the sample was derived from my clinic. So all the patients that look for the clinic to have an assessment related to scoliosis, so all of them were suspicious of scoliosis, were invited to participate in the study.
So would we be able to say that they were all already diagnosed with scoliosis, or some of them they were not sure yet?
They were not, most of them were not sure yet.
Okay.
We're not sure yet. So they were looking for a diagnosis, but when they come to me, and when we started the project in 2021, my idea was, okay, every week I received many families. Some of them received the diagnosis and some of them not. But after 2 years, I'm famous, and now only patients with scoliosis look for me. So it was an important point because I realized that I have less controls than I thought in the beginning in 2021. I mean, subjects without scoliosis.
Understood. Okay, so that one recommendation will be to make that clear in the different articles to just it helps understand who the results would be applicable to. So you had a description of the
Okay.
sample, but it would help describe where they were recruited from. Then your assessments were done by a mix of parents, physiotherapists, and surgeons. Could you
The
tell me
capture.
how many of them there were? And now I understand from today's presentation that one patient wasn't tested by all of these professionals. It was mixed up. Is that correct?
No, sorry that it was not clear. Actually, for the capture of the image, it was allowed to have different person collecting. For example, I invite the participant to participate. I send the video tutorial for the family, and then the parents capture the image at the home environment. But sometimes I did it directly on the clinic because in the beginning, I have some difficulties to achieve my sample because the parents just never take the images, and my proposal was to do both measurements in the same day. So when I collect the data clinically in person, I need the parents to take the images at home. So I started to ask them to take their homes with me at the clinic. Even if the parents took the photographs, it was in the clinical environment.
So do you have the numbers of patients where it was the parent capturing the image, where it was a physiotherapist, or where it was a surgeon?
It was a physiotherapist, a surgeon, and the parents. And yes, I have this number. I can look for this number, but I don't have this number in my mind now because I didn't separate the sample based on the capturing evaluator.
Do you think it might affect the results?
No,
No.
I don't think.
I was wondering, and I mean, your hat might protect against differences because it standardizes the capture. But if the instructions for positioning would differ between a professional and the parents, there might be a difference. And so I'm interested to know, was it a majority of parents or was it a majority of physiotherapists? How was it
Okay.
distributed?
No, it was a majority of physiotherapists.
Okay.
Majority of physiotherapists, and then second place, parents, and third, surgeon.
Surgeon. Okay. And was there one physio or was there multiple physios involved? And was there one surgeon or multiple surgeons?
One surgeon, multiple parents, and 3 physios.
3 physios. Okay. Again, I would recommend this is described
Okay.
in the reporting.
Okay.
Okay. Can you justify why you suggested for the sagittal images that the patients be positioned to present the right side profile to the camera, given that most rib humps are located on the right side of the thoracic spine?
This is a very good question. Traditionally, we use the right profile in the DIPA protocol. And then I think around 2 or 3 years ago, I don't have very clear the date, we tested the difference between photographing left and right profile to check if there is any difference. And our answer was that actually there isn't difference between the two profiles. But one limitation of this study is that patients with scoliosis were few part of the sample. So maybe it could be a problem. Because of that, I always photograph the patients in the same profile. And I think the most honest answer is that traditionally in photogrammetry, we use the right profile. So I just follow the, traditional protocols.
And I think your landmarks of interest are in the neck and the pelvis, which should be visible anyway. But
Yes.
later on, I think I'll ask you a question about, well, why don't I ask it right now? So you chose, can you justify why you chose to measure these 3 parameters? So why FTI, STI, and ATR, as opposed to other things?
Well, the ATR is a wide world used as an important parameter because without rotation, without scoliosis, being very strict in my analysis. The other 2 variables are the frontal trunk imbalance is very important for conservative and also for surgical treatment. So my idea was to check signs of scoliosis because a trunk imbalance could be a sign of an initial imbalance of the trunk, which indicated a scoliosis. And for surgeons, it is interesting to have these parameters with a quantitative possibility. But for sagittal, actually, my plan A was to assess the sagittal index, which is the indirect form to evaluate the thoracic kyphosis. But when we started to develop, I just realized that it would be impossible because I need to measure the distance in the middle of the thoracic. And even if they're with the right profile, it is impossible to visualize in many cases T7, T5, or T6 due to the flat back, which is characteristic of patients with scoliosis. So these three variables summarize important aspects, both for clinical with conservative and surgical treatment.
Thank you. So you answered my question in terms of the sagittal index. You're also reporting results from Fortin or from Zhang, where they extracted other measurements from their photos. And I think you also cited Kutwicki, where they measured the POTSI or they measured other indexes from the photos. So why not add those to the DEPA app?
This is a possibility because for this parameter, I just need some structures that I'm really able to visualize in the captures, in the image captured by the parent. So this is a strong possibility.
Understood. Okay.
But they are less used.
Correct. Yeah. So one of the strategies you use to avoid having the parents forced to locate some landmarks was to have the digitization of the neck edges and assume that the center point would reflect the position of C7. Can you justify why you trust this is a good estimation?
Well, I try many ways to do this. And then as a spoiler and extra, when I analyzed the data and the correlation was 0.7, I wasn't happy because I would have better results. So I try to do this differently. So I try to determine by myself where is C7 or T1, eliminating one click. So first 2 clicks here and the midpoint is C7. Then only 1 click in the intergluteal cleft and I decide where is C7. And I chose the first 45 images. I run the analysis again and surprise, it was exactly the same correlation. So first, yes, we can determine. My choice in the beginning was, I think that this is one way to minimize the error, to establish where is C7. But then when I realized this new analysis, it's the same. So the error is the same.
Maybe one suggestion for the future would be, since you have do you have access to the X-rays of all the patients? Could we verify from the X-rays
Almost
that the
almost
C7
all.
is in the middle? Okay, that might be something
Yes.
worth doing. All
I
right.
have 63 X-rays.
Now, in the sagittal analysis, you're using S2 in DEPA and you're using S1 on the X-ray analysis. Can you justify why you chose an S2 label on the DEPA?
Yes, I saw this, but it's not on X-ray. It's on clinical in person. Difference the comparison between in person and yeah. Okay. Actually, the idea was to use the same, but for one reason, we changed it. The truth is we used S1 for both, but I call it S2, but it was a mistake.
So
But we
then
use S1 for both.
you have different people using the analysis software to digitize where the C7 is and digitize where S2 is. What are your instructions to help them locate this on the picture?
Well, we have a training standardized, and the instruction was to try to imagine where S1 is looking at the photo. And one difference and one difficulty was that for the frontal picture, the patient showed the intergluteal cleft, right? But for the sagittal, sometimes they change the position of the cloth because they were not comfortable in showing their bodies. And they push a little bit upper the clothes. So I standardized that it was important to try to identify the position of S1 based on anatomy. So look at the picture, try to imagine the lumbar spine, and when it ends, try to locate it the S1, so the beginning of the sacrum, and try to not take into consideration the clothes. Depends.
So now that you realize the inter-rater reliability for STI is suboptimal, it's not great. Could we improve your instructions to locate this, or is it just too difficult to determine where C7 is and where S1 is?
Another possibility is to use the cloud line as a reference. This is another possibility, but I've been thinking about a way to improve this measurement and to reduce the source of variability to have a better result in terms of inter-rater reproducibility. I'm thinking about, I think, yeah, the training maybe with the training with different instructions, it is possible to have better results.
Okay, but you don't have any specifics yet. You're thinking, you're hoping, but do you have any suggestions yet?
First, the idea is to use the cloud line. So actually, it has to start prior to the analysis. So the instruction for the capturing of the image should take into account the position of the cloud, and maybe we can use the same line to determine the position of S2. It is another methodology that we have to test it.
I agree. Okay. All right. So still in chapter 3, you're using rock curve analysis between DEPA and some in-person measurements. The in-person measurements, they were on a continuous scale. How did you define the diagnostic category that you wanted to detect with your rock analysis? What was a positive?
My cutoff, yes, my cutoff was 7 or higher for the scoliometer.
And you use ATR 7 or higher for all your analyses,
Yes.
for the FTI, for the STI, and the ATR?
Exactly.
So why try to have the frontal imbalance be a diagnosis of rotation exceeding a certain threshold? Was there evidence
I don't know.
somewhere suggesting that frontal imbalance is useful to diagnose ATR over 7?
Actually, we were interested in studying this relation because once we can predict the scoliosis based on easier to collect parameters, maybe we can have more and more patient diagnosis earlier. And this year we performed a study between this correlation in the frontal trunk imbalance and angle of trunk rotation. And it has a high correlation. So I was wondering why not? Actually, the idea is to use a reference standard that we choose to use scoliometer, because it could be Cobb angle, as I put in the appendix. I try with the Cobb angle, which is in the same plane, but the result was very similar. But the idea was to explore this relation. Okay, if we are using surface and we are using clinical parameters, why not trying to understand if the position of the trunk in the frontal plane is not a way to predict the scoliosis in a patient?
So I share your interest in understanding if it's a predictive measurement in a context where you're trying to validate, is my digital app frontal imbalance measurement able to detect in-person frontal imbalance issues? That analysis does not address that problem. So I was wondering, why not use a threshold of in-person frontal imbalance and see if your application frontal imbalance measurement would be able to detect that?
Very good idea. We talked about this. We talked about try to determine a cutoff point. For example, for SAS, the SAS approach, we have a cutoff point to treat the patient. So when is necessary to correct the frontal plane? When the frontal trunk imbalance is higher than 2 centimeters or 20 millimeters. So we have a cutoff. And I discussed with Claudia about this, and this is our next analysis, because if I perform this now, I would have 9 rock curve. It would be confusion for
I would
understanding.
say
But yes,
in a chapter where you're hoping to validate your measurement, I would argue that frontal should go with frontal, sagittal should go with sagittal, and then ATR should go with ATR. And then the
we get
question
in
about
exactly this.
predicting diagnosis is a different question.
And this is why I didn't submit this chapter yet, because I think that we could work on that. And this is a very interesting analysis, because we have cut off for the sagittal, for frontal, and also for sagittal. So this is my next Sunday work.
All right. You report that you have about 50% of your patient that present a thoracic curvature.
Yes.
But you're not describing the curve types of these patients. And I think there's a relationship between frontal imbalance and curve type. Are you able to describe how many patients had a thoracic dominant versus a lumbar dominant, single or double curves in your sample?
Yes, I can do this based on my data. I have all the information, but I don't have this information now because we didn't perform this type of analysis. But it is totally
Available.
feasible to,
Okay.
to have this information. Yes, because this is important. Actually, even if you have a double curve, for example, when you have the involvement of the lumbar region on the scoliosis, usually you have the displacement of the trunk from the same side of the lumbar curve, even if the patient has a thoracic curve. So yes, we can add this information, and it is a short sentence describing the topographical classification of the patients.
Understood. in your paper, again, on validity, you chose to report Spearman correlation for your correlation, but you're also reporting linear regression analysis with the R-square and the regression equation. How do you justify using non-parametric on one side and parametric on the other side?
Very good. This is why you were invited to be here. Very good analysis. I didn't notice, but this is a very important point, because why I chose to, you just realized why I chose to use Spearman, because I have a non-parametric data. So the right correlation coefficient is Spearman. But in this case, it is an exclusion criteria to use linear regression. So I need to study how to solve that.
All right, we can have a discussion about that later. Would you mind sharing your slides again and showing me your Bland-Altman plots?
Yes, sure. Just a second.
Yeah, thank you. Sounds good.
Here?
Yeah, this is a good example. So you reported in your presentation today that you see a pattern in your errors in this analysis.
Yes.
What is being presented on the x-axis?
Sorry?
What is when you build this graph, what are you reporting on the x-axis, on the horizontal axis?
On the x is the mean.
Is the mean of the two measurements, one in person and one with the app.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a very obvious pattern. Where can you interpret what that pattern means in terms of where is the most error observed, and is the error in a specific direction in different portion of the range?
Well, my first idea about this trend line for both frontal and, I'm sorry, wrong. Oh my God. I don't know what happened. Just a second.
That's okay.
Okay, here. Frontal and sagittal show the same pattern, which is a trend line. And my interpretation was, with this trend, the higher the measurement performed by the teleconsultation, the JIPA, the higher the error and the lower the agreement between the two measurements, which means that with the higher values combine the lower agreement.
Okay, so I agree with your this interpretation for your sagittal. If you go back to the frontal image, it seems to me that if it's deviated where the in-person measurement is bigger than the DIPA, you tend to, in a patient that's deviated to the right, DIPA tends to underestimate the deviation. And then when the patient's deviated to the left, then the opposite pattern is happening. Do you have any hypothesis for why we would observe that pattern where DIPA would have overestimation when the patient presents one way and underestimation when the patient presents the other way?
No, but I don't know if I agree with you. Could you repeat, please?
So I'm looking at a group of data points here that is above the zero line when we move into a deviations to the right. So from
to the right.
Yeah, so if we move to the right, we have positive error. So that means that DIPA has underestimated the deviation to the right compared to in person. Because your other axis shows that you did in person minus DIPA for your measurement error.
Yeah, but I don't know that this is the reason. And I don't know. I think that equal to this blend Altman, we could divide into this because as we talked early in this conversation, when we have a lumbar curve, the trunk tends to displace to the side of the lumbar curve.
Mhm.
Typically, the lumbar curves are to the left. What I can see in this graph is that I have patients displaced to the left and to the right. Probably the patients displaced to the right, they have positive values for a mathematical definition, and they have thoracic curves. And the patients displaced to the left, they have negative values because they are displaced to the left, and they have lumbar curves.
Okay. We'll have to follow up on that one. Can you move to the angle of trunk rotation Bland-Altman plot? So the next one, yeah. In the text of your thesis, you suggested there wasn't the same pattern of errors in the difference. Now, when I look at this, I would argue that every angle of trunk rotation that's positive tend to have errors that are more in the positive range. And then every angle of trunk rotation on the left that are negative, they tend to have errors in the negative range. And that's what your graph is showing. So I think you still observe that kind of error pattern for the angle of trunk rotation.
But if we divide the graph in the middle, taking the x-axis,
Yep.
putting a line and a vertical on 0, and you divide the graphs in two. Angle of trunk rotation to the right, and angle of trunk rotation to the left. If we divide, we have no trend line.
Okay,
I don't think we have trend line.
So maybe it's not a trend line, but what would be a Bland-Altman graph appearance if there was no relationship with the mean?
Well, we should have very distributed points with
And you
all
see
the
that here?
subjects. Yes, I can see. If I divide, I can see. With
you get two patterns. You don't get one single homogeneous pattern, right?
Yeah.
All right. And I don't know how I am doing for time, so stop. Maybe let me know how much time I might have.
28 minutes.
Oh, I see. Okay, so maybe I'll go with, in your thesis, you have a figure on page, which was now for me 54, where you summarize your rock curve, where, and I'm not sure I understood what was happening there. So you're dividing patients whether they have, so if I find the figure number, page 54. It was in chapter 3. It's your last figure in the results section of chapter 3.
Figure 9.
Figure 8, sorry, is the one I'm interested in. So you're presenting.
Figure 8, okay.
Are you able to
flow diagram?
Or just speak through the flow diagram? So what are you showing in this flow diagram?
Well, this is a standardized flow diagram from STAR checklist, where you have to show that based on the cutoff of your new instrument, what was the behavior of your sample. The main idea of this diagram is to show true positive, true negative, false positive, and false negative, because we need this information to build this flow diagram. So once, for example, you can't know these numbers from the rock curve. You cannot know this number from the rock curve. So STAR checklist request this flow diagram so you can show true positive, true negative, false positive, and false negative.
Okay. All right. And so I understand this has been created after you did your rock curve analysis and identified that 4 degree was a
Yes.
threshold.
Yes,
Thank
exactly.
you. Okay. You have illustrations of how you measured ATR using DEPA. And some of the figures, it seems that the 2 points are placed in different places than where we would place the scoliometer. So I don't know if you're able to share your screen of some of the ATR
Yes.
figures that you had in your thesis, and that will be my last question because
Sure.
I know we're almost out of time here.
We have one here.
You're not sharing for me at the moment. Are you able to turn on the sharing?
Yes, I will, but I need some
Okay.
skills. Are you talking about this?
Yeah, so this is the example I had in mind. So by definition, your ATR would be placed on the most prominent part of the rib hump on the right, but it would also
Yes.
be placed on the most prominent part of the erector spinae mass on the left side. And right now, this the point on the left is placed almost over the spinous processes. It's placed at the bottom of the valley as opposed to the top of the mountain on the left.
Yes. Not actually. You cannot see the whole body of the patient, but the idea was to click, and the orientation for the evaluators was also this, to click in the highest and the lowest point of each hemibody, close to the spine, thinking about the size of the scoliometer, because we want to recreate the measurement performed with the scoliometer. So you don't agree that this point to the left is the lowest point close to the spine? Because this was the orientation. I'm not sure now if I did this. Probably I did this analysis.
Okay. I thought that this picture illustrated that the point on the left is in the spinous process valley, as opposed to be on top of the erector spinae further out to the left.
Just placed it to the left.
I would have placed it a little bit further to the left. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for your answers and then all your work in your thesis. I'll let other people examine.
Okay.
Dr. Eric, I will be very brief. If you can use part of my time, be my guest, please.
All right.
I'm learning a lot. I'm just loving this. And then if you can, if you have more questions, please, you can maybe use more 5 minutes. I don't know.
Or I can let you ask yours, and if time is available after, I can come back. Either way. So in that context, Isis, if you can share your presentation again, you were showing your ROC curves. I think the last ROC curve, I have a question
about. Sorry, you want me to share what?
You have your graphics of the ROC curves. So you're showing the area under the curve for the ATR ROC analysis. So in your presentation for chapter 3.
This one?
That's right. So I can see the curve with the purple dots on it. Then there's a little light blue curve under, which I think established the 95% confidence interval. Yes. I don't understand why the space between the horizontal, the 45-degree line and that light blue line is shaded blue. Because if you move to the one just previous to that, you notice how the shaded blue stops at the confidence interval limit. So
the confidence interval, yes.
So I wonder if there's a glitch in producing this figure.
Sorry?
I wonder if there's been a glitch in, like an error of the software when it produced the figure. So it might be something to double check.
Yes, you are totally right. I didn't notice.
Okay.
But it is strange because the confidence interval should stop with the blue line.
I think so. Okay. So we agree on that. So you ultimately report in the discussion of this study that Zhang found different correlations between the frontal imbalance depending on the curve type. Yet you did not explore it. Was there a reason why you didn't plan to analyze your results by curve type?
Well, actually, we usually do that. We divide the sample in thoracic and thoracolumbar sometimes, and in lumbar. Usually we do that in our research group. But what we saw during our last study is that sometimes when we divide the sample, we have very discrepant number of, for example, thoracolumbar is always the lowest number of patients. So this time I decided to not separate and to perform the analysis of an entire way. But this is one of the points that I can do better, and that is easier to do. It's easy to do. I can divide the sample and I can analyze separately.
Okay. You do have a discussion of the results from Beauséjour, and when you say that, you end up saying, we emphasize that one of the positive aspects of using DEPA is, in addition to confirming good diagnostic accuracy, we can do that without completely remotely, where it's the professional doing the measurement instead of the parents.
Yes.
Can you discuss why you think it's an important advantage compared to if everything could be done by the parents?
Yes, absolutely. Probably the source of error will be lower because imagine we are facing families that many times listen about scoliosis for the first time when we ask them to use a scoliometer. So sometimes it's difficult to use. It's easier to take a picture. No doubts on that. Even for professionals, because we have for this study of Beauséjour, and we have other studies indicating the use of the thumbs under the telephone to measure, we can have serious mistakes on these measurements because there can be always a tentative to align the phone and just consider the hip hump, but mainly the side of the hip hump, if it is on the right or on the left. So this is an enormous advantage of DEPA, which allow the professional to measure themselves,
And I would
reducing
like to
the
ask
source
you
of
to think
errors.
about, is there a disadvantage to DEPA requiring professional to take the measurement?
Sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of your sentence.
Is there a disadvantage of requiring that professional takes the measurement?
A disadvantage requiring the professional take the measurement? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay. How long does it take to download an image and get set up to do the measurement for the professional?
30 seconds.
Okay, so it's a rapid option. Okay. Because one concern I had was that it might add to cost of consultation to require that. So
Yeah. No, it's very fast and it's very user friendly. Actually, the software is better than the app because of that. Because of that, some parents said it's too difficult to hold the phone and to look at my son and check the paper sheet. So it's very sensitive, the app. So
then
the
that's my
software,
next question is, you chose to build your app where your tolerance is plus or minus 1 degree on these two axes. Why did
yeah.
you select that as your threshold? And would it still work if you changed and allowed a bit more? Would that help?
I don't know. I don't know. This is we need to test it. But we started with 0.5 because in the chapter 2 I told 0.5. And then we moved from 1. Why? Because it was too hard to hold the phone in the exactly aligned position. So we allowed 1 degree of inclination, thinking that 1 degree will not change the results. I will not think that the patient have this imbalance when the patient really don't have. And to check what you said, I think this is our next step, my next Sunday work, that is try to reduce the sensitivity and test again if the results are reliable.
Okay. In the final chapter, you report that some images were missing, possibly because of artifact, possibly because of sensitivity issues, or possibly because of server issues. Can you describe how many of each of those you encounter? What were the most common problems?
Actually, we have from frontal, we have 3 losses. So 1 linked to the server. What does it mean? I took the picture and it disappeared.
It didn't get transferred.
This is the meaning. And then the other 2 were related to artifacts on the image. So it was impossible to visualize the structures that we request for the measurement.
So can you speak more about that? So what was in the picture that caused these artifacts, or is there a problem?
No, it's not related.
Or is there a problem with the position?
Good question. Yeah, probably related to the position, but mainly the clothes. For example, if I have like the clothes are like this, it is impossible to know where the neck is for the measurement in the sagittal and also in frontal.
Okay.
But with the system itself, the only problem was that some pictures disappear.
Okay. I think those were my key questions, so I'm happy to sit at this point. Thank you for your answer, Isis.
Thank you for your contribution.
Okay. Now I invite Professor Robert to question Isis.
First, thank you for invitation. I'm going to speak first in Portuguese because I don't have native English and a good English as Isis Navarro is able to speak. That's why I'm going to speak first in Portuguese, after in English, to Eric and Jefferson. Sorry, to Eric and understand my questions. So it's a great pleasure to be here with great professor like Claudia, like Eric Parent, Jefferson, and thank for invitation. I have the opportunity to work with Fabio Ferri, who worked in Alberta University, the University of Parent, and unfortunately he passed away, but we worked a lot with Brazilian Spine Society. I have a orthopedic background, surgeon, so I think that I will add some things and questions to improve your great job, outstanding work. First, I like to talk about the presentation. I have some suggestions. I think it's better first I comment in the end of my questions. You are able to answer, okay? Well, in the presentation, I have a suggestion. When you have information, just put the first author. Vou falar em português e depois vou tentar falar em inglês. Assim, a sua apresentação está excelente e os slides muito bem preparados e você tem uma facilidade muito grande, você já tem um treinamento muito grande em aula, em apresentação. Mas a minha sugestão é quando tem um slide com pelo menos uma afirmação, eu vi que você coloca várias referências de autores que colocaram aquela metodologia ou aquela afirmação. Então, eu escolheria o autor que foi o primeiro para o slide ficar mais enxuto, né? So my first suggestion is to put just the first author in the slide, okay? Outro ponto é que você teve alguns problemas na apresentação, como no áudio. Teve uma hora que alguém abriu o áudio e eu já vi muito candidato se perder nesse momento, né? Fica ansioso e você lidou muito bem, você ficou calma. Você falou assim, olha, estava escrito em português, e essa era a mensagem. Então você resolveu muito bem, isso tem que ser avaliado também, tá? I said that she had a problem with the audio on some moments and the technical issues that she solved very well. This is a good point, okay? Outra sugestão, pelo menos na área médica, nós temos, na parte de coluna, não, na parte de ortopedia geral, ao contrário, né? Mas na coluna vertebral, a gente sempre vê o raio-x a paciente de costas, com convexidade para a direita. E é um padrão, tá? Eu não sei se é também assim na área de fisiatria, na área de fisioterapia, mas é um pequeno ajuste que poderia ser ajustado. I said that in orthopedic specialty, we see the patient from back, so the convexity on the right. So I suggest change this slide, okay? De qualquer forma, são poucos comentários em relação à apresentação, que, a meu ver, foi excelente. E, agora eu vou falar alguns pontos da tese, eu não vou repetir o que já foi de metodologia, muito bem discutido já, mas eu tenho alguns pontos que, na verdade, são dúvidas, e se a sua orientadora pensar, entender ser interessante, hoje as teses são de base eletrônica de dados, então realmente tem essa flexibilidade de muitas vezes ajustar pequenos pontos, né? Eu vou compartilhar minha tela, que eu acho que fica mais fácil para mostrar o ponto onde eu tenho a questão. So now I'm going to present the formal thesis to comment some questions. Are you able to see my picture? Você está conseguindo ver minha tela?
Yes.
Eu vou, o tamanho tá bom? Quer que aumente um pouquinho? Quer que aumente um pouco a tela? Não tá dando para ver bem.
Sim, não, tem que aumentar um pouquinho.
Deixa eu só tirar da minha frente, então, aqui Aqui, ó. Vou aumentar um pouco. Me fala quando estiver bem.
Tá bom.
Melhorou? Ok.
Sim.
Primeiro, eu gostaria de falar aqui, eu entendo essa letra, por isso que eu vou comentar com você. A letra de médica, né? Dr. Handwriting. Na verdade, o primeiro ponto que nós avaliamos no trabalho é a relevância do estudo, tá? E isso o trabalho é muito relevante. Por quê? Primeiro que a telemedicina, ela não era no Brasil a gente não poderia fazer telemedicina, nos outros países já era realidade, inclusive tem pacientes no Brasil que pediram segunda opinião para universidades externas, né? E por questão de legislação não era permitido. E o Covid, uma das vantagens, entre aspas, né? O Covid foi o desenvolvimento da possibilidade da telemedicina, né? Que acabou continuando, né? Então, é um trabalho que vai auxiliar muito esse acompanhamento e essa análise desses pacientes, principalmente num país de dimensões continentais como o Brasil, e também na parte do sistema público, porque a telemedicina tem o potencial de diminuir custos de avaliação, de locais remotos, né? E escoliose, você sabe que é um dos problemas principais é a questão do diagnóstico de início precoce, que existe uma falha no Brasil por esse problema. So I said that the clinical relevance of the study is very high because now you are able to perform telemedicine in Brazil. We have a lot of issues such as public health assessment that telemedicine can help a lot, has a potential of help a lot. So congratulations for your study, okay? I have some questions. I note here, nesse ponto do resumo, muitas vezes nós temos acesso mais ao resumo. E você colocou, Vossa Senhoria colocou como alta qualidade metodológica. A minha questão talvez seria interessante falar qual foi o critério para você falar de alta qualidade metodológica, porque existem vários na literatura. Depois, Sim. Lendo a sua tese mais para frente, eu vi que você anotou mais para frente, né? Mas eu acho que seria interessante colocar aqui de uma forma sucinta. So my first suggestion and question: what does it mean high quality study? Okay, in the abstract. Em medicina, na literatura médica, eu não sei se na literatura fisiátrica ou de fisioterapia tem essa recomendação formal de do número 1 ao número 9 escrever por extenso. Isso é questionável e cada pós-graduação deixa de um jeito. Então, minha pergunta é se existe algum critério na pós-graduação do 1 ao 9 de escrever por extenso. É uma das formalidades aí que pode ser melhorada aqui, mas isso se tiver escrito no critério da pós-graduação. My first question is about the number 7, because some journals in Brazil request from 1 to 9 describe the number. Okay? This is my first question. After 10, you are able to write the number, okay?
Yes, correct.
Eu tenho uma pergunta em relação ao que significa o termo. Eu vou confessar que eu não consegui, eu não tenho tanto acesso a essa palavra na literatura médica de repetibilidade. Seria a confiabilidade, essa que é a minha questão, tá? Se é confiabilidade ou se tem outro termo, ou sim. E aí, mais para frente, eu vou perguntar qual que é a diferença de confiabilidade, repetibilidade, se você pudesse argumentar um pouco em relação a isso, tá? So, what's the difference between repetibility, confiability, reliability? This is very hard to understand. So, I would like to that you explain for us, okay? Você está anotando tudo? Aí no final, aí eu acho que fica mais fácil no final, tá? I have a question aqui. Why 50? Do you perform any statistical analysis or sample calculation? Mais para frente, eu vi algum dos capítulos você fez, mas aqui eu senti falta. So, do you perform? This is a 50 from literature, or do you perform a sample analysis? Okay. Here, what's the difference of repeatability, reproducibility, reliability? This is very. I think this is important to students that is watching you. So, eu acredito que do ponto de vista didático é interessante essa explicação, tá?
Okay.
Let's go. Em síntese, está muito bem escrito, é difícil encontrar realmente um erro, eu não encontrei erro de digitação, que é tão frequente em teses, né? E realmente eu procurei algum erro aqui devagar mesmo, eu não encontrei, muito bem escrito, né? Here you put CASP. My question is, CASP is methodological quality assessment. Why do you choose CASP? Because you have another or others in the literature. Essa é a minha questão em relação à parte metodológica. Here, you put classification, juvenile, adolescent, adult. What age do you use to juvenile, adolescent, adult after 18 years old, adolescent from 10 to 18? It's important to put here and the reference, okay? Because we need a formal reference. When you are dealing with a software, you can put the R, a marca registrada, né? É um C, um R. Então, eu senti falta aqui desse ponto para ou não, se quando é software não coloca, não sei, isso que eu pergunto também, tá? So my question is about this letter. Excellent. Correct. Why did you include these studies? Why did you? This has just one patient, okay? Not just a simple one, okay? Why? And this not reported. So my question, what did you select these studies? Ou seja, eu estou perguntando por que você colocou na análise esses estudos, porque eu vi que você tentou selecionar os melhores estudos da literatura, tá? E case reports, em geral, são excluídos nas análises de trabalhos para a avaliação de evidência de literatura. Então, explicar o motivo, né? Ou se eu não entendi, ou se ele foi excluído, eu fiz uma confusão aqui, tá? Vamos lá. Eu senti a falta da referência do teste de Adams, que a gente utiliza muito na prática, né? Então, acredito que... Da onde que vem essa referência? Se vem de algum livro-texto, se vem de algum paper, né? So, I would like to know about the Adams test reference. In medicine, in Brazil, we use a lot to observe the deformity. The Talley triangle. Do you know Talley triangle? O que é o triângulo de Talley? O triângulo de Talley, na verdade, até tem uma pegadinha. Eu não vou conseguir falar isso em inglês, infelizmente. Então, eu vou falar em português. Tem uma pegadinha que a gente pergunta para os residentes. Quem foi Talley? Né? Na verdade, é aquela medida do triângulo aqui, que é o alfaiate que faz. Eu acho que isso até é raro, né? Poucos fazem isso hoje em dia, se compra. Mas e tem uma simetria desse triângulo. E eu não vi assim dentro do seu software essa análise, ou por que não, ou se não é tão relevante na área de vocês. So I'm asking about Talley triangle. I don't know if in Canada they use this sign, this measure. So outra questão, você falou que a Vossa Senhoria, né? Comentou que uma das limitações do teste de Adams é que você não consegue avaliar de forma quantitativa. Minha pergunta é, o escoliômetro não resolve isso? So my question is about the scolimeter. These devices allow the measure the Adams test de forma in an objective way? This is my question. Let's go. In medicine, we use a lot Cobb angle. Do you think this is important in future studies? Use Cobb angle as a measure to correlate correlation your measures or no? And I saw in rock curve that you use Cobb angle. What are your criteria to define scoliosis? Is 10 degrees from Scoliosis Research Society? This is my question. Okay, let's go. I'm going not to repeat that we discussed. Okay. Nas medidas resumo, que você comenta assim, as imagens, né? Aí você fala de mínima e máxima, mas eu observei que você não usa, eu não vi o desvio padrão na medida resumo, tá? se existe algum motivo estatístico, quando você discutiu com a equipe de estatística isso, ou eu não estou entendendo aqui novamente, mas geralmente a gente coloca o mais ou menos do lado do número principal aqui. Aqui eu vi variação, né? So why do not use DP, or standard deviation, to summarize your results? Okay, let's go. Let's go. Here I have a question. Did it work in Apple? But in the end of the work you said, né? Então tem duas perguntas assim. Para passar para o Apple, eu acredito que o Apple é um dos mais utilizados aqui no nosso meio, acho que no mundo, né? A parte logística de passar para o Apple se é muito diferente. E como que no Brasil funciona dois pontos. Uma é a nossa lei de proteção de dados, ela é bem complexa, né? E muito difícil. Então, ela complica muito os estudos clínicos. Se teve algum problema com essa lei, ou se o aplicativo tem alguma forma de proteção de imagem, não sei, essa é a minha pergunta. E como funciona no Brasil, nos Estados Unidos, os países mais avançados, a questão de royalties ou de patentes é muito mais avançada que no Brasil. E como no Brasil existe isso, é possível você patentear e como é que é a logística disso? Então, essa é a minha questão. So, does it work in Apple? Tá? And about the image protector law in Brazil and the royalties. Okay, let's go. Aqui image protection law is how you deal with this problem. Ok. Vamos lá, já estamos, acho que, na última parte das minhas dúvidas. Was there any difference between parents and doctors and physios? Minha pergunta é se você fez alguma análise de se foi mais difícil para os... não sei se você teve acesso a isso, se os familiares foi mais difícil essa coleta, a aderência foi melhor ou não, funcionou muito bem, da mesma forma que os médicos e os fisioterapeutas, ou os pais tiveram um pouco mais de dificuldade de lidar com essa coleta. So, was there any difference between the data collected by using parents or doctors and physios? Okay. Let's go. Eu tenho alguns residentes que utilizam o celular para medir o ângulo de Cobb. Minha pergunta se é do seu conhecimento se esse método é acurado, tá? Se tem algum estudo, porque eu fico olhando e falo assim, eu que sou mais antigo, sou da velha guarda já, eu vou na reguinha, e tem alguns, mas agora tem vários softwares, né? E se ele funciona bem, se ele é acurado, tanto para o Adams, mas eu vejo que eles fazem o Cobb, e eu falo assim, nossa, não é possível que funciona tão bem assim. So my question is about the iPhone to measure Cobb angle. Does it work? Você fez uma revisão desse tema, essa é a minha questão, tá? In this appendix, page 60, in raw curve analysis, Cobb angle. So, scoliosis by using Cobb. How many degrees do you consider scoliosis I didn't see or I think it is better to put the reference Sclerosis Society. I don't know. Ou lendo escapou talvez essa referência no texto. É só você me lembrar.
Tá certo, não tinha.
This is my question. Repeatability, reliable reproducibility. For me, is very hard to understand. So I would like to a lecture about this.
Please invite me.
Okay. Here the same question about the Cobb angle. Okay. here, do you describe the simple size, okay, in this chapter? My answer about in the beginning of the work, okay? Ok. Essa é uma questão que eu perguntei, que a telemedicina realmente é muito importante, ela é muito, o potencial de uso para o acompanhamento dos pacientes, mas nós sabemos que a escoliose, que nós mais acompanhamos é a escoliose idiopática, mas para você definir que é uma escoliose idiopática, ela requer um exame clínico neurológico detalhado. Então, eu senti falta na discussão de falar que, olha, a primeira consulta desse paciente tem que a recomendação em relação ao exame clínico detalhado em consultório presencial, né? Mas talvez o acompanhamento do paciente, do tratamento do paciente, a telemedicina pode usar muito, mesmo no diagnóstico precoce, mas sempre uma avaliação presencial, em algum momento ela é importante. Então, I think this too is important to follow these patients, but the first consultation with neuro exam is mandatory to define the cause of scoliosis. Acho que seria interessante um parágrafo ou frisar isso, tá? Né? Aqui o Tyler Triangle, né? Eu coloquei aqui na discussão também para perguntar como foi descrito. Vamos lá. Sempre no final das minhas perguntas, eu sempre gosto de perguntar, eu falo, por exemplo, você vai para o doutorado. Doutorado, uma das funções do doutorado é que você é o topo, né, da hierarquia no Brasil, né? Tem também livre docência, tá? Mas para o Brasil, a legislação, quando você tem o doutorado, você chega no topo da parte acadêmica e você está gabaritada para orientar pesquisas, né? Então, eu sempre gosto de perguntar dos estudos futuros, o que vocês têm em mente nessa linha né, de pesquisa, quais são os futuros estudos? So, I would like to know about future studies, tá? E uma sugestão de colocar, de correlacionar com o ângulo de Cobb, que nós utilizamos muito na prática clínica, e hoje em dia a forma funcional de avaliação desses pacientes é por meio de questionários mesmo, é o famoso SRS 30, né, que foi validado aqui na Santa Casa. Então, ainda os questionários, eles são muito importantes para, inclusive, quando você manda para as revistas avaliações de estudos diagnósticos bem complexos, detalhados, uma das perguntas fala assim, peraí, mas e a avaliação funcional, focada no paciente? Então, a minha sugestão seria, nesses futuros estudos que vocês estão montando, além da avaliação radiográfica, associação de um questionário, a minha sugestão é do SRS 30, que é o mais utilizado na literatura. So, I'm going to ask about future studies and to add Cabo angle and SRS questionnaires in your studies, in future studies. Então, gostaria que você comentasse a respeito disso, você concorda, discorda, se você discordar, não tem problema, é só a gente está... Eu vou parar
Isis, tu tens 16 minutos para elaborar a tua resposta, tá?
Então, eu vou ficar de ouvinte. Vou ficar de ouvinte, ok?
Tá bom, tá bom. Bom, okay, I'm going to argue in English to allow Eric to understand my answers. Let's start with the repeatability. What is the difference between repeatability, reproducibility, intra and inter-rater reproducibility, and reliability? Actually, this is one of the expertise of our research group. So we dedicate many time first to understand what is the difference. Second, what is the best methodological way to conduct studies with this purpose? And also do the studies to understand the measurement properties of new evaluation tools that we developed. The main difference between repeatability and reproducibility, intra and inter, is that for repeatability, we measure consecutively the same phenomenon. In my case, it was a picture. So I measure one time, I close, I measure the second time, I close, and I measure the third time consecutively. And this is to check this consecutive measurement with no changes if they're consistent. For the intra-rater, I was the evaluator that performed the same, the measurement twice, but I did the measurement once, I stopped, I take care of my kids. 5 days after, I measure it again. And I could check if 5 days after, so I forget the answers, am I able to measure exactly the same number? And the answer was yes, my reproducibility was very high. And for the inter-rater, well, all the 3 evaluators performed the measurement in the same picture in the blinded manner. So I didn't know about the answers of my colleagues. But the term reliability, in my understanding, represent a bigger field. When I talk reliability, I am talking about reproducibility and also about validity in many cases. So this is a bigger field where reproducibility, validity, agreement, all these measurements are insert. And we have some guidelines to help us. We have a very good guideline, which is COSMIN, which is called COSMIN, with very good description of any type of study and the study design and methodology. And I choose to follow for this study, which is the chapter 4, the GRAS guideline, which is a guideline related to reliability and agreement study, because in this case, I could check both, and it was my idea. Okay, so just to keep you calm, it was not clear for everybody what does it mean repeatability. We have many confusion in our field. So, for example, one of our students, a PhD student like me, is dedicating his research to define the differences and to understand better each methodology dedicated to each field. For example, repeatability, reproducibility, validity, accuracy, because even for accuracy, I analyzed 2 ways of accuracy: measurement accuracy and diagnostic accuracy, which are different. So I need to have different statistical analysis for this purpose. So feel welcome with your question, with your doubt. We are in doubt also, but this is our understanding as a research group. What are the differences between repeatability, reproducibility, validity, and diagnostic accuracy, for example? For the chapter 2, yes, we did the sample size calculation, but I didn't put the information. So the 50 images were based on a sample size calculation, and this is a very important information because it increased the methodological quality of the study. The CASP scale is a new scale, is actually a database of different types, scales for different types of studies. This is always a concern in our research group, how to perform that methodological quality assessment with a good scale that is very linked to the purpose of the study. So if I have a systematic review of clinical trials, it will be easier because we have more more consistently state scales as Pedro, as Cochrane, for example. So it's easier. But the truth is that systematic reviews of cross-sectional studies and mainly of reproducibility, validity, diagnostic accuracy is not so common. So these new scales are starting to appear. And I present for our research group, we had a discussion, and we understood that that was adequate for my purpose. I hope that in the future, more and more and more authors cited our paper telling that it was a good idea to use this scale. This scale adheres very well to my idea to check the validity and the reliability, and my statement about high methodological quality was was based on the number achieved by the studies. Regarding the reference related to the chronological classification, it was based on SOSORT guidelines published in 2018 related to 2016, and juvenile, idiopathic, and adult in that study were based in SOSORT criteria. So you are totally right. I should add this reference on that paragraph. And then about my included studies of my systematic review, actually, even if the study of Sabdini, for example, it was only one subject with those scoliosis, because this study was that they use a t-shirt sensorized with sensors, and they try to monitor the posture by the difference mechanical in the sensor in sitting, between relaxed posture and active posture. This was the idea. It's a very good idea, but no clinical postural variables involved. So what we could see was that even with very good ideas like this, there's a big gap in literature relating to practical way to evaluate clinically the patients with scoliosis. So following my eligibility criteria, that were the studies that could be included in my analysis, even with a low number of participants, even with no people with scoliosis, because in the future, it can be applied for patients with scoliosis. Reference for the Adams test, yes, it was based on a paper. And then I can add the comment of the Thalle triangle. I think this is in the same line of Eric's question about POTSI and ATSI, other parameters clinicals. Why we didn't choose to use this? Because it's not so common, not for physio, but I have a very good relationship with surgeons and physiatrists, and very often that they talk about this. But in my understanding, it is essential to move from an observational way to evaluate for a quantitative, objective way to assess this patient. And clinically, when I observed what is the triangle, what is the difference, this is subjective. So we didn't use this in our clinical practice. We have more than 3,000 patients with scoliosis being treated conservatively. And I think it's mainly connected with the applicability and objectivity of the measurement. So because of that, we didn't use this parameter. The use of the scoliometer, yes, it solved the problem with the observational aspect of the Adams test. And I comment during the thesis exactly this, that the Adams test is fantastic, fast, and low cost, very feasible to apply. So it's awesome, but it's not quantitative. And the beginning of the use of the scoliometer solved this problem. In the beginning, we used 5 degrees for the cutoff point. And then more and more and more studies, we could see that 7 degrees is the best cutoff for the scoliometer. Our criteria, and thank you so much for your comment, we need to add this information, which is what was the cutoff for the X-ray, for the Cobb angle as a reference for the building of the rock curve. Perfect comment. Our criteria were 10 degrees, equal or higher than 10 degrees, which is the criteria of SRS. And also for SOSORT. So we use this criteria, and I'm going to add this information. Thank you. I didn't report the standard deviation in the chapter 2 because my data was non-parametric. So I choose to report the tendon, the central measurement, and the minimum, the maximum, and the range. Because we believe that with non-parametric data, this is the best way for the audience understand how my data were organized. Okay, one limitation of my study is that it's not available for Apple yet, but we were working on that during the last months. And it's not so hard, but the language of programming is completely different for Apple and Android. So we run some tests. We have the application ready, but it didn't work. So we need to have an app that actually work. We are trying some new program with the Apple. About protection law of the data, this is a very important aspect. So far, the app and the software is only available for me and for Claudia and for you if you want. But what I mean is that it's not available for users yet. Before we make it available for users, we need to think about this. So one way is that at this moment, the app allowed to send the image for whatever you want. So at the end of the capture image process, he asks you, would you like to send it by email? Would you like to send it by WhatsApp? Do you want that I save one photo in your gallery? So this is the way that you are dealing with this protection law so far. And then in the future, we need to understand better if this is okay. We didn't have any problem with the ethics committee, for example, when we tell them, okay, we are going to have an app. It will be like a cloud. And then we decided, no, we are going to send the image, and probably it will be the manner to organize this aspect. But I'm not 100% of sure. Eric also asked about the difference of collection, which is almost the same that you asked me, but your question was a little bit different. I think that the difficulty was the same for families, physiotherapists, and surgeons. The difficulty to handle the app was exactly the same, which is very sensitive. So you have to concentrate. You have to stay without breathing for a second to hold the app, to hold the cell phone and take the image. But the compliance of the families was very low, very, very low, because they have to watch the video, they have to put the fixed paper on the ground. So the compliance was not good. About cell phone to measure the Cobb angle, yes, it works. We have many studies on this topic. And for my methodology, actually, I use this. So we have a study published in 2017, which validated the use of the smartphone for the measurement of the Cobb angle. You have to align the upper part with the upper vertebra, and all the procedure is described in this paper, but we have many papers on this field, and yes, it's totally possible. In my opinion, it's easier than manually and is more precise. Almost there. We can add a paragraph regarding the neurological clinical examination. Actually, one of the studies included in my systematic review, which is from Sachin and Lieberman, published in 2021, if I'm not wrong, they described a very extensive teleconsultation examination for patients with orthopedics condition, not only spinal conditions. And they talked about neurological examination, what is possible, and some tests that are impossible to do without presence. This is the reality. And they suggest some ways to overcome this limitation. But I think it's totally possible to add a paragraph on this topic. Thank you for your comment. Future studies. Let's talk about the questionnaire. Almost to the last question. the questionnaire, one of the field of our research group is the development. The big field is development of alternative tools to evaluate posture. Okay. Between these alternative tools or new tools, we have questionnaires. And we have been developing some very nice questionnaires during the last, I don't know, 10 years maybe. So now we have a new questionnaire which is dedicated specific to this topic, which is patients with scoliosis treated conservatively. Because one limitation of the use of SRS 22 or SRS 30 is that some questions are dedicated to surgical treatment. And these questions that we developed, and it was validated, has to be published yet, but it was validated, are more connected with my reality as a physiotherapist. So very good idea also, but I agree. But my suggestion is to use another questionnaire, more connected with my target population. And for future studies, well, for this Sunday, I have to do my new rock curve, which I was waiting to do. For the next Sunday, I will try to change some things and prepare for submit the chapter 3. But my main focus in life is to do a clinical trial treating patients to show for surgeons, especially for surgeons, that conservative treatment really works. But it's not any physiotherapy, it's specific physiotherapeutic scoliosis exercises. It's a 3D brace. So this is my dream, to treat patients and to show to my community in my country, yes, physiotherapy works. And I can use all the tools that we developed to evaluate these patients clinically and also through telehealth now. I think that's all.
Okay. Okay, Robert?
Excellent.
Okay. Now, I invite Professor Jefferson.
Hi, this is
Hi.
first of all, I'd like to apologize for my English. I hope I can make myself understood. Secondly, I would like to thank Isis and her advisor for inviting me to participate in the evaluation of this doctoral thesis. I was very happy and honored to receive the invitation. As a professor, witnessing the growth and development of a student is extremely reward task. However, it's not often that we have the opportunity to witness the birth of a true researcher. Isis, I had the immense pleasure of following a part of your journey in academy, at least since you arrived at URGS, which I believe was about 10 years ago. In these years, I have seen the evolution and transformation of that physiotherapist who arrive here with a sparkle in the eyes, wanting to grow, wanting to evolve, wanting to learn. A sparkle in the eyes that over the years has not faded. On the contrary, it has intensified. Following your trajectory, seeing the work you have produced, your participation and organization of conferences, the article published, reading your thesis, watching your classes, I have no doubt that I'm in front of a doctor who may not have yet the title, but already has the fire in the eyes. Well, reading your document, I have some specific observations, very specific. During the read, I made notes and observations regarding typing errors, numbering, and identification of figures with the same numbers, and so on. Suggestion of writing, among other small things that I believe do not affect the understanding of the test, but may contribute to the final quality of the test that will certainly be consulted by other students. Since our time here is quite limited, I will hand this observation to you at an appropriate time and proceed to discuss what I believe to be a central issue of this. Okay? Your proposal to develop, validate, and evaluate the psychometric, linemetric properties of an evaluation protocol for idiopathic scoliosis through teleconsultation is undoubtedly worthy of a doctoral thesis. The concern of a three-plane evaluation giving the three-dimensional characteristic of scoliosis is noteworthy. You have achieved excellent results with angular measurements, while linear measurements still need improvement.
Yes.
Well, doing your measurement with the patient, in my opinion, you have two main sources of errors, or perhaps it will be better to say source of variation in the measurements. Let's see. First, the intrinsic variability of the measurement itself, such as trunk imbalance, for example, expressed by a linear measurement, whether in the front or in sagittal plane, is expected to vary over the time. I'm certain that the imbalance measurement in the patient today will be slightly different from an imbalance measurement in the same patient tomorrow. Therefore, it's important to know the MDC, minimal detectable change, to each of your variables. And this is, for example, Dr. Robert, is one of the utility to use repeatability and reproducibility, because you can check these indexes. And then my first question to you is, do you have this information? You have three variables, frontal plane, in the sagittal plane, and transversal plane. Do you have the MDC of these variables from reproducibility? Because your measurements are not simultaneously. You have in-person measurement one time, and in a second time, in a second situation, in a second opportunity, the patient was repositioned, and then you measure again. And then it's not the same measurement, are two different measurements. And then I need to know the MDC. Do you have this information?
Well, for the angle of trunk rotation measured with the scoliometer, the MDC is 2 degrees. But for frontal trunk imbalance, we had the MDC from Zhang studies, very recently published, which is 10.2 millimeters. And for sagittal, we don't have MDC. I don't have this information.
Okay. And when I see your values, for example, from trunk rotation, you have less than 1 degree in-person measurement and JIPA measurement. And if you have MDC of 2 degrees, and then you have a great, I think you have excellent results. You agree with me?
No, sorry, I couldn't understand. Could you repeat, please?
Sorry. You told me that the MDC from trunk rotation is 2 degrees.
Yes.
Okay. Check the difference between the measurements in person and with DIPA. Yeah. It's less than 2 degrees. It's around 1 degree. And then this is a great result. And then you can talk about it, and you can say much more about your app, because if you do 2 times in-person measurement, you expect to have 2 degrees. And then your difference of
Yes.
1 degree is wonderful. Average degree, I'm talking about 1. Okay?
Yes.
It's important. And of course, you need this same information for the other 2 variables. And then I think if this index is not available in the literature, you already have a right job to do. This is putting your Sunday task list. I don't know exactly.
2024.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Yes,
Okay.
because we collect it, but for this purpose, I need more than 1 measurement. So this is easier to do because I've seen the patients very often. So I think in 1 month I can have a good sample to understand the MDC for frontal trunk imbalance and sagittal trunk imbalance.
Okay, but I told you we have 2 sources of variability. One is this intrinsic of variable. The second, there is a systematic error in your measurements, which is visible in the blend out plots. You talk about it.
Yes.
This error occurs especially in linear measurements, being greater in the trunk imbalance in the sagittal plane. I believe that this error has 2 distinct sources. One source, there is a difference between the plane where the reference value is digitized, the 2 points on the paper, and the plane where the measurements take place. Now
Perfect.
You see you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Even if we extensively try to find a way to put in the same plane, so maybe the reference line, which is the sheet of paper, should be aligned with the medial malleolus, not lateral malleolus.
No. Well, in the sagittal plane, correct this error is easy, very easy. I suggest position the paper with the left foot on the paper and the right foot off the paper, so that the center of the body, where is the measurement is approximately on the same depth of the edge of the paper. This is quite easy. Perfect. Okay, this is will have an improvement in your measurements. Will be better. Yeah. Okay. In the frontal plane, the depth of the measurement will depend on the inclination of the trunk.
In forward.
You told me before it's normally in forward, but you have an inclination, and it's not. My suggestion in this case will be, instead of placing the heels on the edge of the paper, position the arch of the foot in the edge of the paper.
Position the arch. Maybe the lateral malleolus is more concrete.
Easier, yeah. Align. Well, maybe you can have a correction, but you're not sure exactly.
Yes, because what
you can do with the heels off the paper and the toes in the paper, on the paper, would be perfect, but will be improved your measurements for sure. Okay.
Yes, only one limitation. For sagittal, it will be easy because my instruction for the families, remember that the main objective is tell to the families how they need to collect the picture. So it has to be easy.
Okay, yeah.
But in the sagittal is okay, but in frontal, the arch maybe is not so.
Yeah, maybe you can use the malleolus. I don't know, but for sure you need to make a small correction to be to improve this measure.
Very good idea.
Anything you do better than put your heels in the edge will be better. Okay. Well.
Yeah.
But the most source of the error, the second one, and it comes from a mistake. I'm quite sure. Based on the average difference between the in-person measurements and the measurements taken with the app, I would venture to say that your programmer entered the wrong value into the routine. Consider the proportion. Yeah, I'm venturing. Consider the proportion of different deeper measurements are on average almost 50% larger than in person.
Are you talking about frontal or sagittal?
Sagittal.
Ah, okay, yes, exactly.
Deeper measurements are on average almost 50%. I calculate this 45, 48%, something like that. Larger, deeper is larger than in person in sagittal plane. I would venture to say that your program is set the default value at a smaller side of A4 paper. The paper size is 210 millimeters in one side and 297 millimeters in the other side. When you see the proportion of this measurement will be almost exactly that the proportion of your measurement. And then I'm ask about your program here, but I'm quite sure he makes a mistake. Well,
no, I'm sorry. It is not possible because actually when you calibrate the system, you inform the measurement. So you can put either 210 or 219.
Okay, but and then I will ask you another thing. Did you measure a no distance or an angle using the app? In other words, did you take a photo of an object you know dimensions and check the difference between the results?
No, because we only tested the angular measurement, which is easier to understand.
Okay.
But during the last week, I was with a patient and I said, okay, your trunk imbalance increase. So it is bigger than 6 months ago. It is not good. I'm going to check your previous photographs. And I look at the photograph and the distance looks like exactly the same from now. And I said, oh my God, how could I measure 0? It was a distance like this between the marker in C7 and the plumb line. And I remember that on the ground in my clinic, I have a reference line where I align the heels of my patient to measure this. And I know the distance of this, and I have this line is a black line in all my pictures, so I can confirm if this distance is the same.
Okay.
Because I think that you are talking about the calibration of the image, the conversion of pixel to millimeters.
Exactly. Well, I strongly suggest that you do that. You take a picture of something you know the dimensions and check. Just do, because if you have
in the same plane.
Yeah, if you have an inanimate, a solid something, you have no doubt. You need to have the same measure. Okay, calibrate your app.
Yes.
Okay, but in the meantime, you can test the app using the same paper that the patient uses in the image. In addition to the first 2 clicks on the fixed paper on the floor, first you make 2 clicks on the papers. Okay.
Yes.
Your protocol to analyze. The first thing to do is 2 clicks on the paper, and then you click on the patient. Don't click on the patient. Click again on the paper. You need to have the size of the paper.
I can do it right now.
Yeah, you can do it. And tranquilize myself, because the difference is something is too far from your measurement. I'm certain that by addressing these issues, you'll be even more satisfied with your results. The depth of the measurements and this check with the dimensions. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, one last question. I think it's chapter 4. Repeatability is chapter 4, is it?
Repeatability, yes, chapter 4.
Okay. I was curious about some results, page 69. You have when you repeat
page 69.
69 in my document. 69 is the table 1. Table 1 of chapter 4. Table 1.
almost.
Results
Okay.
table 1, chapter 4.
Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering if the evaluator 3 was the most experienced. I was trying to guess, but doesn't matter. But sometimes you have 3 pictures of the same person instantaneously, no change, or you don't expect to have any change between pictures, isn't it? But sometimes you have a big difference in the results from one picture to another. For example,
you mean photo 1 and photo 2 in the same plane?
Okay, take the first evaluator 1, axial photo 3, for example, is almost 20 times. The MDC is almost 20 times in picture 3 than picture 2.
Yes.
Why so different? So big difference. This happens in other cases. Just take one example. Why do you think you have so different between pictures?
Good point. Where between the measurements of the photograph in the frontal and sagittal plane, the patient didn't change the position. So the patient just remained in standing while I was waiting the system send the picture. But for the axial plane, that is the plane that you are talking about, the patient stand and forward bending again. So they're really different. And sometimes the point is different.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, this is explaining. Okay, well, I'm satisfied. This is congratulations on the excellent work.
Okay, I need to tell you that I just did what you suggested, and the measurement is exactly the same.
The measurement of the size of the
Actually, is 200. It's not exactly the same. No. For the calibration is 297, and after the new 2 clicks is 296.2.
It's quite good enough. And then we need to work with the depth of the measurement. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
You can you can also use the same pictures, clicking not in the edge of the paper, but clicking a little bit inside, using to use your pictures. You understand what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Not at the corner, but in the middle of the page.
Yeah, exactly, in the middle of it. Approximately in the between fits.
Understood.
Okay, let's try to do it.
Let's
okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
I'm satisfied.
I really like Jefferson's idea to try with a known object in the picture. And if you are going to do that, maybe try the object on the ground, but also at a certain distance off the ground. I wonder if you have a vertical difference also in your images.
You can have a distortion from the camera. Yeah, you have others kind of in different position of the image.
Yes. And actually, my final feeling about this is that yes, there are many sources of errors. For example, distance, position of the patient, clothes, and quality of the image, because some smartphones are different from others. But taking into account all the sources of errors, I think that DIPA as e-health system is brilliant because it works.
Well, at this moment, it's up to me to talk about Isis Navarro. As her advisor, I would just like to say that Isis was an excellent doctoral student, a fundamental member of our research group, always ready to donate her time to the students. Isis, My dear friends, thank you very much for your partnership for so many years. I will miss you.
It has been 10 years.
Yes. I wish you an even more successful journey, but you can always count me. Okay?
And I will.
Well, now I ask Professor Jefferson to invite the panel to deliberate on the concept of ISIS. Please. Já desliguei o microfone.
Não desligou, não? Agora desligou sim.
I'm trying to create a room to discuss. I think Dr. Robden already go inside. I will go there. And well, I turn off the record now before.
We live very far, and it was my pleasure to work with you as a very important person in the scoliosis world. My intention is to be a SOSORT president one day, so I need to do many efforts in my country, but also in the future to contribute with good science. I deeply thank to Jefferson that many times take my doubts about mathematics, which I loved, but I always make some mistakes with the numbers, but I really enjoy to do it. Thank you so much, Jefferson, for your availability to be always there for me, always. Thank you so much, Robert, for your contribution and to participate in this process, and to your availability to be here, even if I am not a surgeon, but you are here, open, and with very nice contribution for my job. And Claudia, my Wonder Woman, I love you. This is the truth. I love you from the bottom of my heart. You are my idol, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity that you give me to understand better the science, to grow up in the science world, to help more and more students and patients with my knowledge, and another many advices that you told me, that you give me during these 10 years together. I thank very much to my family that it is almost insane to do PhD with 2 kids. And I have one during the PhD, so it was very hard for me to be here. I need to choose different things to be here. And I'm very happy with my choices. So I also thank to my patients that are here kindly watching me, to my friends, and to my partners, like my big partner in the clinical approach with the patients. I thank to my parents for the support, and they were the responsible for showing me that study is very important. And as I didn't born rich, I need to study a lot, and I'm doing that. So thank you so much for your virtual presence here. I'm very my son. I'm very happy with this moment, and it was a pleasure to perform this extensive research. It was a big pleasure for me. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of our postgraduate program, I would like to thank the professors of the examining board, and I congrats Dr. Isis on completing her doctorate, and I declare the session closed. Vamos fazer uma foto? Todo mundo paradinho
Vamos.
uma foto?
Pega o mano. Ó, pega o mano. O teu pai deve estar vindo aqui. Só um pouquinho, Cláudia. O Danilo tá aqui também. Bota o mano.
1, 2, 3.
Ai,
Todo
que
mundo
legal.
fez, eu não sei se a ficou boa, seria bom se mais alguém fizesse também.
Peraí que eu consigo aqui, ó. Vai. Preparar. Apontar. Vai. Foi.
Só para deixar, tá gravando ainda? Só para deixar claro, que talvez tenha dado uma falha na gravação, então para deixar claro em português em bom tom, a Isis foi considerada aprovada pela banca e, portanto, sim, ela é doutora. Palmas, Isis.
Pega minha camiseta ali. Eu só quero dizer que a partir de hoje eu só vou andar assim na rua, ó. Eric, here is writing Dr. Mommy. My kids built this for me. So you have to, support me during all week long wearing this. Então tá.
Obrigada a todos aí pela presença.
Obrigado, parabéns. Tchau, tchau.
Tchau.
Obrigada a você.
Congratulations.
Arrasou, mana!
Thank you, Eric. And let's schedule a